Welcome to the HODLBoomer Podcast. This is the first one we've done. That guy's my brother, Greg.
Hello.
We have a high-level goal today. We want to tell you our origin stories, how we got started, and then we'll define Bitcoin for you from the perspective of a hodler, and we're actually going to tie it in with our Christian worldview. And finally, we have a simple question for you to think about. That being said, we're here as people who went through this. Real talk. We just want to give you on the level, honest discussion about Bitcoin, what it did for us. It might rewire your brain. Our thought process is that there's not that much not that much podcast. That makes sense. Not that many podcasts out there that just speak to the boomers. Might be really interesting for other generations too. Greg, you'll probably remember this. You were talking to me about Bitcoin forever. And honestly, I think I was prideful. I'll admit that now. I said everything that new Bitcoiners said before they got started. I said, it's just magic internet money. It's not real. There's nothing behind it. It's going to fail. Computers control it, and computers can screw it up, and blah, 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 blah. You remember that?
I remember it vividly. I tell people you were the hardest orange pill I had. Probably the second was my stepson, Evan. I was talking to him about it, and without getting into great detail, he finally admitted to me. He says, I put $500 in it just to shut you up because I was tired of hearing about it. And then he forgot about it, and I honestly thought he lost his wallet. He thought he lost his wallet. And when he finally found it again, his $500 was like $5,200. So then he was like, okay, I think we're going to pay attention now. So, yeah, he was
almost the same story. Almost exactly. I honestly don't remember what year it was. I think it was 2023. Bitcoin had gotten down to about $16,000. And I said, well, geez, okay, I'll take a little bit out of my 401k and I'll dump it into Bitcoin. Honestly, it was to shut you up. And I was amazed. I had at that moment a real desire to look into a lot of the folks that you told me to look into. Sailor, Mark Moss, read The Creature from Jekyll Island, looking at a lot of the tools that you had suggested that I look at, and it began to soften me. I said, "Wow, this is true."
That's just because you're getting old. You're getting soft.
Hey, you're older than me. I know you don't look like it, but we shouldn't argue about that. Well, you bring up a good point, though. I mean, I'm a boomer, as you are, and we're risk averse. We don't really like jumping out and doing things that might make it, might not make it. So I was honestly lucky. At the time I got involved, as I said, it was 16K, and the growth was just crazy. Now, I don't want to suggest that I have a lot of Bitcoin. I don't. But the payback convinced me to take a look. There's a lot I could talk about around 2023. My life absolutely changed, and not in a good way. You can go to my blog at hodlandtees.org and you can look at my personal story if you care to. But the point is this: for every 100 people that are in Bitcoin, there's 100 different stories. People come to it the way they come to it, but they have some things in common. Everybody gets started because of a conversation with somebody. That's what this stuff is about. That's what my company is about. It's about really orange pilling people and giving you a way to start the conversation. The two things that I would say are true, certainly true of me. I don't know about you. Everybody buys comparing Bitcoin's price to the dollar and hoping for a gain. They all, at that point, when they've made an investment in Bitcoin and they look at the price every single day, they're hoping for an increase in fiat dollar value. Think about how stupid that is. After that, unless they dump out of Bitcoin because, hey, I made $10, I'm gonna take my profits and run. they are very vulnerable at that point to getting out of Bitcoin. If they study it for about 100 hours, and I'm serious, it takes 100 hours. You can read books like The Sovereign Individual, or this is a fun one. This reads in about an hour. Not. It's The Creature from Jekyll Island. This thing is, wow, that'll open your eyes. Once you invest that 100 hours, then you're in, and you become a hodler. And hodler simply means someone who's holding on for dear life. It's kind of a joke. I would say that if you get into Bitcoin, please, please, please don't think of it like a stock to trade, period, full stop. I was classic, reluctant Bitcoiner. Now I mine, I run a Bitcoin merge company, I do this podcast. You told me one time we were here at the house, you were visiting, and you said, wow, you gave me crap for I don't know how many years, and now you're a Bitcoin maxi. What's up with that? And I said, well, sorry. What's your story? I never even asked you. I really don't know what you're going to say. How'd you get started?
My very first introduction to Bitcoin, and after you talked about being risk averse, I had to admit that I like playing online poker, not for high stakes. But the first look I had at Bitcoin was if I put money into my poker account, if I used Bitcoin, I didn't have to pay a fee. And then one of my stepsons had introduced me to a podcast that Glenn Beck did with a guy called The Great Crypto Conspiracy. And without getting too deeply into it, basically, they were talking about how while the media, the banks, the politicians were all bad-mouthing Bitcoin and crypto in general, they were in the background buying it up as cheaply as they can. And that has not stopped.
Wow.
In fact, that has actually gotten worse, if anything. Yeah. Bitcoin's the one. I mean, that's the one you need to pay attention to. And then honestly, in my opinion, that's the one you want to start with.
Just to set the timeline, what year roughly was this?
I bought my first Bitcoin in August of 2018.
Wow. You weren't early, but you were early. That's cool.
Well,
and secondly, go ahead.
I mean, I know people that have bought it in the hundreds and lost it because they didn't know what it was. You and I know a guy. We won't mention his name.
Yeah. There's I honestly, my first introduction to Bitcoin, I just thought of this, wasn't you. It was one of the engineers that worked for us. And he said, hey, you ought to take a little bit of your money and put it in this thing because it's interesting. Just throw $1,000 at it. If I had invested that $1,000, wow, it would be a different conversation. But that's not what God had planned. It's something else in mind.
People's attitudes have changed. The people that have been bad-mouthing it forever are now admitting that, okay, we better pay attention or we're going to be done. And if I could just put an exclamation point as to what you said with regard to looking at it like a stock. I actually, before I got involved in Bitcoin, I was working for a short time with an investment company. I got my Series 65 investment advisor's license. Probably 90% of the people I talk to, their first questions are, how much is it per share? And how do I sell it back?
Right.
And my answer to both of those is you don't. I mean, that's the answer I have now, but it's hard for people to not think in those terms.
It is. And I find myself, I still have a fiat brain. You know, I have traded in fiat since I've had my first nickel. And now there's this new money that's coming, and you're going to be surprised at how ubiquitous it is. I still think in fiat terms. I mean, it's like breathing. You can't get away from it.
By the way, you got your first quarter by stealing it from my piggy bank in Dallas. I don't know if you remember that.
I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. and I haven't paid it back yet. And besides, I bought something for you with it. It was a Christmas present. You remember? It was a model car.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were so into cars.
Yeah.
Actually, that was me. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, about faith and Bitcoin. How does this sound money, and what do we mean by sound money, real quickly? If you look at what's happened to the dollar since whatever Bretton Woods agreement, it has just lost value geometrically. A dollar is not a dollar. They're screwing with you. And I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there is a very, very real they're doing it, to reduce the value of the dollar across the world. And read this. Read The Creature from Jekyll Island. It is footnoted to the nth degree. It's very, very, very well done. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's a tough read. There are some other books that will go over Bitcoin. This doesn't even mention Bitcoin, but there are other books that will go into what's behind Bitcoin and mention The Creature from Jekyll Island. So my point is, might as well start at the origin level. Getting back to faith, Bitcoin doesn't care who you worship. It absolutely doesn't care. There is nobody behind Bitcoin. There's no corporation behind Bitcoin. There's no person in charge of Bitcoin. There's no group of bigwigs that order Bitcoin. It's just code. Very well protected code, extremely well protected. There will only ever be 21 million, and nobody organizes it. That's the amazing part. It's a bunch of nodes. I'm getting deep again. So when it comes to Bitcoin and faith, the only question is, does this support my worldview, or does this compete with my worldview? And I would suggest to you that the faith connection, for me, is probably one of the strongest. You've heard two very different stories, Greg's origin and my origin in Bitcoin, and we're unabashedly Christians, but we're not trying to make you become a Christian. We're just telling you where we come from. So Bitcoin isn't Christian, but it's sure an enhancement to the way it works. Bitcoin is for everyone. That's a book by Natalie Brunell, by the way. It doesn't care if you're Gentile, Jew, Arabic, Buddhist, or any other, or no religion. Scripture talks about money over 140 times directly. When we include all aspects of money, or how it touches people, or how it impacts people, there's over 2,300 verses in Scripture about money. You can condense this into 6 categories. Honest weights and measures, you've heard about that from whatever worldview. Debt, saving, and stewardship, or those are same term. Serving 2 masters. How can I serve God and then serve my job as well? And then sovereignty and freedom. How does Bitcoin impact that? How does it enable generosity? So those are the kind of categories that are in at least Christian scripture about Bitcoin. In Proverbs, we talk about honest weights and measures. It says a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Fiat currency is the opposite of a just weight. It's absolutely, there's a thumb on the scale. There's a huge thumb on the scale globally. It's the very definition of a false weight. So it's silently in the background, it steals power through inflation. Bitcoin's $21 million cap is the hardest of all monies, harder than gold. I know you're reading a book right now about Bitcoin and Christianity. He goes into a lot of detail about explaining the origins of Bitcoin and how it operates. Does it talk about that at all, about honest weights and measures?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. When you're talking about honest weights and measures, I have a couple toys I brought with me. What are these 2 things? It's kind of shiny there.
Quarters.
Yeah, quarters. They both have the same value, right? You go to Costco, and after you spent $600 when you went in for 3 items, and you see that little machine there, you drop a quarter in there, you get a bottle of water to drown your sorrows that you just spent $600. This quarter was minted in 1964. This one was minted in 2020.
There you go. I'm owning it.
2020. Yeah. So it face, they have the same value. Okay. But the one here in 1964, prior to 1965, all U.S. coinage was made with, I shouldn't say all, dimes, quarters, halves, and whole dollars were made 90% silver. So that whether you have 10 dimes, 2 halves, or 4 quarters, you have 71% of an ounce. If the minimum wage in 1964, and it was $1.25 an hour, that means you got 5 of these. If you traded in 5 of these now, that's worth $74.55 based on its silver value. If you got 5 of these now, it's worth 5 of these. And tomorrow it's going to be worth 4.5 of these.
The advent of Bitcoin is a big deal. It's a big deal in the Christian church. It's a big deal across churches. Debt is a huge component of why we're in the trouble that we're in. Anybody who watches 5 minutes of news hears something about the debt that we're in. The Bible warns that debt can lead to slavery. And in the U.S., we owe tens of trillions of dollars, a sum that can't realistically ever be repaid. So how are they going to do it? They're going to do it by debasing the currency more and then printing more of it, which if you think about it, that changes the hurdle rate. And that term quickly means how much do I need to make to stay even? The number will surprise you. Wealth with purpose behind it, like Bitcoin's architecture, refuses to participate in that debt-based system, because Bitcoin never turns into debt. Follow me here. It has no issuer. There's nobody that issues Bitcoin. And it can't be inflated in order to cover bad decisions. So when we use the term HODL, that's what we mean. Hold on for dear life. Don't ever release your Bitcoin. There's ways to live, and there's books written about it, on a Bitcoin standard. To be honest, I'm not there yet. I can't afford to be. I'm still held by the fiat system in terms of the things I have to pay for. That's what I'm working toward. Huge in the Bible. Proverbs 13:11 says that wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Not buying whole Bitcoin, but stacking sats, the component that makes up a Bitcoin over time, is the literal modern expression of that proverb. Stack it a little at a time, increase it. It's the opposite of gambling or get-rich-quick schemes. We talked earlier about altcoins. I don't play in altcoins. I'm not smart enough. I don't know how to deal with them. There are thousands of altcoins, thousands of them. And people will brag, hey, I just bought Mickey Moo or whatever. And I invested $100 and I got back $5,000. Okay, good for you. How many people invested, a little bit and lost it because they didn't time it right? And with Bitcoin, it's about time spent in the market. It's about how long have you held on? How long have you hodled your sats? The next thing I'll talk about quickly is serving 2 masters. Matthew 6:24 says, you cannot serve both God and money. That's true. And it's actually an argument for Bitcoin, not against it. Fiat money demands you serve it by constantly chasing returns just to keep up with inflation. Bitcoin as hard money, we'll define that too in a later episode. Hard money that preserves value over time does not decrease. It removes frantic, anxiety-producing treadmill that you're on right now and frees you to be a steward, someone that takes care of money and does things they feel compelled to do with their money, as opposed to a slave to it. Two more, sovereignty and freedom being the next one. Our Christian worldview says that God owns everything. Your Bitcoin is not your Bitcoin. It's God's Bitcoin. But it's provided to you to steward over it. Biblical stewardship means managing what he's entrusted to us on his behalf. So you don't love money. Bitcoin gives individuals real ownership of their savings. And it's free from seizure by government or third-party control. That's not materialism. That's stewardship of what God entrusted to you. And that leads to the final point, generosity being enabled. Whenever your savings aren't being silently destroyed by inflation or being stolen from you by governments who love it, you have more to give. The Bible never condemns money by itself. It does condemn the love of money. It's at the root of all kinds of evil, as 1 Timothy 6:10 says. Bitcoin, properly understood, it's a tool for honest exchange, faithful stewardship, and financial freedom that lets you focus on what actually matters. Similar to gold, but gold actually can be debased because there's no finite amount of gold that's been dug up. They can always dig up more and dilute the value of the gold, if that makes sense. Can you explain that better than me?
I can give you an illustration. Why don't we save it for the next episode? Because I have an amusing anecdote to share, which will probably take a couple minutes.
Cool. Okay. Let's do that. What would you have people think about for the next week?
It requires a change in the way you think. And let me just leave you with a provocative thought. One of my favorite expressions, and it's not mine, I don't know where I heard it, is whoever discovered water wasn't a fish. In other words, when you're in the middle of something, you can't detect something from the outside. When we're in the middle of this system of fiat money, a type of indentured servitude, when you really get down to it, yeah, it just requires a change in the way you're thinking, and it's hard to detect that when you're in the middle of it. So step outside of your previous understanding based on your life. Do the education. That book that Steve mentioned, I got a copy of it here myself. Creature from Jekyll Island. If you don't want to hold the book, you can listen to it on Audible. It's about 24 hours listen. I've listened to it twice and I've read it once. You know, it was life-changing. I know it's an overused word, but yeah, just trust yourself to learn. Trust that you have a hard time detecting what you're in the middle of.
We'll just leave you with this. We genuinely are doing this not to make money. We're doing this because we think it's important. We think there's a gap in what's being talked about out there. There's a lot of podcasts on Bitcoin. There are podcasts who are just about talking about other podcasts. There's so much. So stay humble, stack sats. God bless you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.